All right. First and foremost, of course, I give all praises, honor, and glory unto the Most High God, Yahweh, and I do so in the name of who the world calls Christ, Yahweh Shai, the Son of the Most High God. Man, it's your brother, Chief Priest Alazar Lawyer, aka the Gorilla Hebrew, and I'm back. What episode is this? My fault. I don't even know what episode I'm on. Not high. It gotta be 12 or 13. Forget a cough. Forget it. Yeah, number 13. Okay, cool. Number 13 for the Serangos. So I got a little bit of a cough, so y'all gonna have to forgive me for it. But I said I was gonna do this. I don't know if I said it on a previous podcast, but I certainly said on somewhere, I think it was on a Kev Mac live stream, that I was going to go into my top 5 Kev Mac video interviews, okay? First and foremost, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not in tune with Kev Mac videos, Kev Mac is who I would consider one of the, if not the top gang historians, gangologists, if you will, in the world today, specifically when dealing with the Crip and Blood culture stemming from Los Angeles, LA, Watts, Compton, Long Beach. Okay, the brother has chronicled an immense amount of information, history from several of the key players and those who are close to them over the course of many years. He mentioned how he had started recording gang history starting with the Peace Treaty in 1992, and I believe possibly even before that. I think even before that, to be honest with you. But the brother has done an immense amount of work as far as these things go. And he has a channel, it's called Kev Mac Videos. I believe he has another one called Kev Mac Live Stream, something to that effect. Let me look now to be sure. I'm subscribed to both with the bell. Anybody who spends any time around me, any considerable time around me in my home, has definitely had to watch Kev Mac Videos, because I'm going to watch it, period. Nothing nobody can really do about it. I forget. Did he take his live channel down? Well, just look up Kev Mac in your YouTube search. It'll pop right up. Kev Mac Videos. He has almost 30,000 subscribers right now. 29,816 as I'm looking at it. And the Most High God, I know people may look at this some way, but you got to take a look at how God is magnifying certain individuals for certain purposes. And I believe this brother certainly has a purpose. And there's certainly divine inspiration behind it. I believe people need to understand these things, and people need to see the maturation that these brothers who were the founders of many of these organizations have come to. And it could help be a good example for brothers who have followed in the footsteps of the path and the trail that they've blazed. Especially in factoring into hearing these stories about niggas being in middle school, junior high school, starting these gangs. And think about the very adult repercussions that's come from juvenile decisions with starting these organizations, as well as clearing up many of the misconceptions. One of the main misconceptions that he's managed to clear up through the interviews that he's done is the misconception that the Crips started as a replacement of the Black Panthers, and it was to protect the community. I believe many of the founders have proved that to be false, and I know that spin has kind of been put to turn the Crips into a positive organization, but the founders kept it 100. There was never anything positive about it. It was about bravado, machoism, stunting on the next brother, bullying, etc. And it was. Are there positive aspects to being in a gang, being a Crip in particular? Of course there is. I'm speaking to somebody who was introduced to and brought into, put onto that life before I was a double digit in age. I started getting introduced to that and started wanting to be a Crip at the age of 7 years old. So just speaking from my own personal experience, there's certainly positive things, and I had a lot of not father figures, because I had a father in the home, but I had a lot of big brother figures certainly, it takes a village to raise a child, as they say. So, with that being said, I certainly saw a lot of big brothers and uncles and people who I endeared in that regard, who to this day, my G homies, they especially the ones I was closest to, they don't call me their little homie. They call me their brother, their little brother. There was people who are familiar with my history, or not. There was a particular family who was infamous, who has produced a lot of hard hitters, from the turf that I'm from, and that family endeared me and essentially had to doctor me in, because I was the first person in my family to even go down that path. You know what I'm saying? So there's certainly some positive aspects, but at the core of what Crippin' was about, which blooding is a byproduct of Crippin'. Let's not get it twisted. It is the reaction to Crippin'. And the campaign that the Crips ran for about 4, 5, 6 years before an alliance formed between the non-Crips to start blooding. So I want to make sure that's clear and understood. And for those of y'all who have any misconceptions, please check out Kev Mac videos, because the originals are there and they're telling this story. I'm not just making this up. I'm making these statements predicated upon information that I've collected from various sources. Kev Mac videos being a principle in vetting the sources, in reforming the history of Los Angeles gang culture as we know it, and as how it's affected the world, man. It's important. It's very important, because there's so many of our brothers that's running around the world. When I say the world, it's not just America. Central America, South America, the Caribbean islands, Europe, our people, not just I'm not talking about the white boy that put on a blue or red rag in Germany somewhere. I'm talking about Crips strapped and strong. Okay, if y'all don't know about that, that takes place in a city called The Hague in the Netherlands. All right, a neighboring city of Amsterdam, full of nothing but black people from South America and the Caribbean. That's crippin' hard, real hard. In particular, the what's that set called? The Rolling 200 Main Triad Crips, and they actually in the neighborhood card. And in the damn movie, they get on a plane, fly their ass to L.A., is on the block in the 40s. And you can't even tell the difference. You can't even tell that these niggas is from the other side of the world. They fit in perfectly. It's some of the crazy stuff you ever see, which goes to the spirit of our people, etc. But I don't want to get too much on that, because I want to get into this top 5. It's important, but I want to make sure, because I know a lot of my listeners may not be familiar with the brother Kev Mac. But the brother Kev Mac is doing a work that's necessary and is an intricate part of the history of black people in America. Being a Crip or a Blood is something that is deeply a part of being a black person in America, because so many black people in America have made the choice to become one of these things in the last half a century. It's happened. We know this. It's infamous. Crips and Bloods have became the standard in gang references. People don't reference Serranos and Norteños. People don't reference GDs and Vice Lords the way they reference Crips and Bloods. Period. There is a reason for that, man. Okay? And it's important that this brother is accurately chronicling from the horse's mouths of the individuals who were there the history of it, man. So, without any further ado, through the spirit, I'm going to go into my top 5. Actually, I lied. There's a couple things that I want to say. There was 2 interviews that I'm going to talk about before I get into my top 5, and I'm going to use these as examples, because there are other instances where this happened. And first off, let me also say a big shout out to Kev Mac, man. I hope the brother hears this. I'm a big supporter. He seen me on the comment board. You know what I mean? But so what I want to say is, you had the Neighborhood Compton Crip interview that aired recently. Not too long ago, you also had the Grandies, the original Compton Crip interview, and you had the Center Park Bloods. Well, shout out to the CPBs. Of course, I'm not gonna name the brother, but a brother closely affiliated to the individuals who were in the interview of the CPBs. He's a brother that's in the truth, in the knowledge of that he's a Hebrew Israelite, learning, studying. Talk to the brother all the time. Big shout out to that brother. the thing was, I would say those 3 interviews as well as others, but those 3 stick out the most to me because I feel like those 3 interviews would have been great. Would have been monumentally great and undeniably top 5s, except for it was too many niggas talking at once. That can ruin things. The Bible teaches us, interrupt not a man in the midst of his speech. That is such an important lesson because certain brothers weren't able to fully articulate their points and recount certain instances in history because other dudes felt it necessary to continually butt in, jump in. Okay? And this is why I like the interviews when the brother isolates and gets one brother at a time, or maybe you just got the one brother at a time, everybody else is at the side, and they're jumping in, basically taking turns. But if a brother needs to assistance recollecting something, there's a brother right there to help him out that also was there and experienced it. But I feel like those 3 interviews were ruined because of too much talking, and not letting each brother fully articulate, especially in the case of B-Rat, man, in the CPB's interview. I wish B-Rat would have just had an interview by himself, and that's no disrespect to Taco and Spaghetti, the other brothers who were on that interview. They also had things, but I just feel like, especially Spaghetti kept just hopping in, and I just said, man, let B-Rat cook, man, let him do his thing. I want to hear B-Rat's perspective because he's coming up for that next generation. And I feel like those interviews were stifled, you understand what I'm saying, by people jumping in and in the interview with the NACCs, the one brother, the younger brother, because it was the 2 brothers, I forget their names, but the younger brother, I really wish it would have just been an interview him by himself. I feel like his older brother really held back that interview. And that's just how I feel. And again, there's no disrespect to any of the individuals, and they certainly all have a story to tell and something to offer, but I just feel like each individual should be able to offer these stories by themselves. So the story is, like you have the Gospels in the Bible. You got the Gospel according to Matthew, the one according to Mark, the one according to John, the one according to Luke. Let each one lay their ghetto gospel down, man, according to them, And I just think things would be more effective that way. So those things kind of irked me about those videos, but I still like those videos. Don't let me twist it. I still like them. I still like the vast majority of the content that the brother Kev Mack uploads. There were a few ones that, I kind of didn't like, but guess what? Even if I didn't like it, even if I thought it was boring, I still watched it because I'm still trying to get the history out of. A lot of the guys who were like members of the Slawsons and the pre-Crip and Blood gangs, them was kind of boring to me, I'll be honest. With the exception of Bird, which I'll get to in a minute. But those are kind of boring to me, but I still watched them. I still took it in because there were still tidbits of history that were important, tidbits of history about the black businesses that existed and thrived in LA for a long time. And where in the hell are they now was all I was thinking about when I would hear them. So there's still information there that you can get, even though it may not be your thing. I know the brother recently did an interview with the Santana Block Crips that are out of New York, and a lot of people disliked it, but there's still information you can get. He's still documenting history of how the Santana Block Compton Crips got all the way 3,000 miles away into the Bronx and into Brooklyn. Those are important. But I'll get to that in a minute. Let me give you my top 5. All right? So my top 5, I got to start at 5. Number 5 is the 2018 interview of Barefoot Pookie. The brother Kev Mack has done several interviews of Barefoot Pookie, but the 2018 one is the one that I'll put in at number 5. Okay, for those of y'all that don't know Barefoot Pookie, he was on you'll see him in various gang documentaries, but as well as he was on that show called The Peacemaker that was airing on A&E a few years back, on 5, 6, 7 years back on A&E, and he's identified there as a member of the Payback Crips, which are based out of Gardena, California, just south of LA. For those of y'all that aren't familiar with the geography, but he is an original West Side Crip. Okay, for those of y'all again who don't understand how the Crips started started on the east side of South Central, what is now called South LA. Okay, what is the east side? It's east of Main Street, or some would say east of the 110 freeway. Okay, But it started there. Then they expanded to the West Side, and they began to be known as the East Side Crips and the West Side Crips. They later would expand into Compton, and then the third would be the Compton Crips. All right, and then it evolved from there. Now you have them all over the damn world. But one of the original West Side Crips was Barefoot Pookie. Okay, he had his own gang. I believe he was a part of the Smacks, if I'm not mistaken. And the Smacks, along with certain other gangs, were absorbed and became the West Side Crips. He would go on to start other Crips, other sets, the Undergrounds, the Insane Paybacks, and ultimately now the Payback Crips. All right, but Barefoot Pookie, man, Barefoot Pookie being an original, dating all the way back to the origins of the West Side Crips, and even having the knowledge that he has of before his joining and things of that nature, and how different sets got started and his role in starting different sets. And he even spoke about how the Brims got to San Diego, because I've lived in LA, but I predominantly, as far as California goes, lived in San Diego. The Brims are a large force in San Diego, and I even have members of my organization who are members of the Brims that are based out of San Diego. So I wondered how the Brims got to San Diego, and he was able to document the history of that, which I thought was important to know. When I kind of had poked some fun at the brother who's a Brim in my organization about it, once the history was given by Barefoot Pookie. So that was very valuable to me in particular. And I always like Barefoot Pookie to hear him talk. Again, he's a reputable. He's been around since day one. I've heard Kev Mack and other people criticize his storytelling abilities, but me personally, I like the way he tells stories. I like his information. I want to hear more of him. He definitely is coming in at number 5, Barefoot Pookie from the Paybacks. Okay. Number 4. Okay, number 4 is going to be AC Moses, a.k.a. AC Baba Louie, a.k.a. King Baba Louie. Okay. What a lot of people may not know is about me. People knew me before, of course. I have a Hebrew name now, which is Alazar Ben Lawyer. I have a title of Chief Priest, as well as a nickname of the Gorilla Hebrew, right? Hence the podcast is the Gorilla. But of course, prior to my awakening, I had, names and identities. But my first and middle initial are AC. So since 5th grade, people have been calling me AC. Like when I go to school, I just tell the teachers, whoever, just call me AC. So to know that this is an original Crip and an original Blood. One of the few guys who can say he's both original Crip and original Blood. AC Baba Louie. To have the same, name as me, was interesting, man. And also he's also was called AC Moses. I don't know if because his last name is Moses, but one of the homie from Fadus, used to call me Hoover Moses, man. When I first was coming into the truth and growing my beard, he used to call me Hoover Moses. So it's funny. But anyway, AC Baba Louie is coming into number 4 because he gives such a unique perspective. He, out of everybody alive, I would say, and I could be mistaken, but out of everybody that I've heard from or heard of that's living today that was close to Raymond Washington, who is the original founder of the Crips, he was the closest one to him. He was the closest one to him, and I believe he kept it real, gave the most informative interviews as far as the actual origin of the organization of the Crips, cleared up misconceptions about the organization of the Pyrus and the Bloods in general, how it came to be. I mean, this brother literally chronicles how him and Raymond wanted to be Avenues. The Avenues rejected them. So in a response to the Avenues rejecting them, they started the Crips. Clarifies what the name Crips comes from, because here's the thing, what a lot of people don't know. The origin of the term Crip is one of the most argued about things in all of gangs, in all of gang history. What the name Crip come from, right? You have certain people, especially this is a more modern ideology, that it's an acronym that stands for Community Revolution and Progress. It certainly was a community revolution. It still is a community revolution in progress, but that ain't what it means. Then some will say from the cradle to the grave. From the CR, which is cradle, to URIP, which is the grave. I even heard Tony Stacy recently in his interview talk about that and talk about the crib thing. But I think now, as much as I love Tony Stacy, his book just came out too, A Voice from the Trenches. I recommend it. Much as we love Tony Stacy, I am compelled to side with AC Babalui on this, because he said the reason why certain people had crib tattooed or were calling themselves cribs is because of an air of illiteracy that people was having in the CRIB instead of the CRIP. And he says that the whole Crip name came from there was a particular individual of a gang called the Avenues that Raymond and AC Babalui looked up to that was extremely buff. So they mimicked him and they tried to get buff like him, and they would walk in the way he would walk. And he walked like that not because he was trying to be cool, but because he was crippled. That would be the day what people call a bell or a sag. You know, the G-walk, what Stone Cold Steve Austin imitated and called the BMF walk, etc. That's that limp. Niggas walking with a limp. And that's something that I used to, do, and I still kind of do pretty much because I stuck with me because I used to practice it as a youth, and I was mimicking older brothers to me. And that really all goes back to this individual who was a member of the Avenues that Raymond and AC Babalui took a liking to in that Crip culture, went and traveled all around LA where they was belling around or sagging or limping around like that. And as the Crip culture traveled up the 5 freeway to where I'm from, Tacoma, Washington, that came there as well and got to those brothers as well and eventually got to me. So that's interesting. So that type of history is you can only really get that from Babalui because he was one of the few brothers that was living that was that close to it. He's literally a horse out of the horse's mouth. He is literally an original Crip. Then documenting how he moved to Compton, how when he was in Compton, he lived on Piru Street. He had family on Piru Street, and how he began to run with the Pirus and really start and magnify the Piru identity as a gang. And him being one of the paramount figures in the formation of the alliance that is the Bloods in the jail system. These are all things we don't know because we know about Raymond Washington. We know how the Crips were started. Okay, and Tukey come later. Tukey come on the west side with the aforementioned Barefoot Pookie. All right, for those of y'all that don't know, I'm trying to, I'm speaking to this, and I know a lot of viewers of Kev Mac videos may be drawn to this via the title of it, and they may be familiar with these things because they're as astute in this information as I am. But I know that other of my regular audience is not necessarily going to be that, so I got to make sure that I'm speaking in layman's. But we got to understand that Tukey is not a Crip founder. Tukey was an original West Side Crip, but the Crips started on the East Side in 1969. All right, this is prior to Tukey. No disrespect to the brother, no shade to him. He, of course, was an influential member of the Crips, right? But the brother is not the founder. Okay, I just want to make sure everybody who's listening to this understands. If you don't believe me, just go watch Kev Mac videos and you'll find out. Okay, but Babalui going into, again, formulating Pirus, formulating the Bloods, how the Piru thing traveled around Compton to the different parks and the people getting in allegiance with them. I mean, he goes through all of this, and he has one of the most unique perspectives, and he is an authority, I believe, because of how close he was to Raymond, and again, being an original Piru Street. And also clearing up, because a lot of us always believed that the Pirus were Crips first. Piru Street Crips. That's been propagated out there. He clears up that misconception with saying he was the only Crip on Piru, and eventually he decided to go the Piru way and push the Piru card. Coincidentally, of course, we know Piru is, as they say, Piru is Crip spelled backwards with the C on his back is what they say, which is interesting. But what a lot of people also don't know is Piru is the name of a Dutch demon. It's actually the name of a satanic spirit. A lot of people don't know that. All right? Don't believe me? Look into it. All right? But very interesting information that AC Babalui, King Babalui, AC Moses goes into. So he's coming in number 4. Number 3 is going to be my main man, Nugget. But not the latter one that he did also with the 10 Deuces and the Pasadena Raymonds, but the original Nugget interview that you first had originally uploaded on to your channel, Kev Mac. That was an immensely powerful interview, in my opinion. Those y'all don't know, Nugget is from 120 120th Street, Raymond Avenue, Crip. in LA. I believe that's it technically in the unincorporated city of Athens, I believe, but it's LA. And what a lot of people don't know is one of my childhood best friends is actually, he's from 12 Raymond in LA. So yeah, but Nugget, man, he gave such entrenched history on not only the Raymonds, how the 10 Deuces came about, because a lot of people don't know the 10 Deuce Raymonds are in Inglewood. Inglewood is a vast majority, predominantly blood city. So it's always interesting to see how the Crips in Inglewood came about, you know. You know, he goes into literally the story of basically scaring the 10 Deuces into becoming Raymonds, which was an interesting and a good story. And he also touches on the Tongan Crips, which are another important factor there in Inglewood and being a part of the world family. You know, back in the day when I was young, I used to deal with a girl from over there, you know, and she would always push what we call the famous line. The famous line being the world famous Raymonds, Raymond Avenue, 120th Street, 110th Street, and the Pasadena Raymonds, and as well as the Tongan Crips would also push that line. So I'm always interested in information regarding that, being that they push Tongan Crip. They're quote unquote, they're another race, but they still are representing the famous card. The same way that you have the Sons of Samoa Crips representing the gangster card to a degree, and being in association with the H.R. gangsters, etc. So Nugget brought out a lot of good information in his video. So he's definitely number 3 on my list. I definitely recommend that. Man, he was giving a lot of information, and also relationships with the Raymonds, because the Raymonds are an interesting gang, man. The Raymonds are not a part of, and again, if you're not familiar with these terms, I ain't gonna lie, I'm not gonna explain all of this to you. So those who are in the know, you're gonna know what I'm talking about. But the Raymonds not being a part of the neighborhood card, but being so closely associated with neighborhoods, yet at times engaging in beefs with neighborhoods, worst enemies. Like I said, my best friend from 8th grade, man, he's a 12 Raymond, and he told me straight up, it's in his opinion, his worst enemies are the 9 Deuce Legends. They neighborhoods. Right? So there's a very interesting dynamic at play when you're dealing with the Raymond Avenue Crips, man. And Nugget, you know, he speaks on a lot of that. So I really like that Nugget interview. So I have him in at number 3. Okay. Number 2. My number 2 on my list is the Undergrounds. Okay. Featuring Big Wack and Big Chip, man. That was also an immensely informative interview, man, and I liked the overall positive overtone, not even an undertone, overtone that they were trying to convey of, y'all, we done did so much, we done lost so many people, we have to stop this, we have to talk, we have to do gang intervention, we got to get these youngsters up out of this, man, you know, because for those of y'all that don't know, they had that 100 days, 100 nights thing. I did a video on that when it was going on, and you know, it got over 30,000 views, man. And people want to hear all about it, man. But these were the guys that were involved. You know, the Undergrounds. That set was involved. Undergrounds and all the, you know, the other Rolling Hunters, the Hoovers. You know, that's what it was between, man. And that was a bloody war. And a lot of brothers died behind it, man. And it's unfortunate. And Big Wack and Big Chip, man, they were really speaking to the history of the Undergrounds, how they came to be Undergrounds. You know, and all the various things from day one that had occurred all the way to then, their original members of the UGCs, because again, the UG was going back to Barefoot Pookie was a name that they used, but the ones who really took it and pushed it were guys like Big Wack, guys like Big Chip, who were in this interview. So that they got a really great interview, and like I said, they had an overall message of positivity, man, and the type of spirit that they came in that interview is a spirit that I want to see sweep all gang members. They're tired of it, but also they want to forgive each other. I saw forgiveness in those brothers, man. Forgiveness and a want to move forward. And it's a shame that the average nigga gotta have grandkids before he gets in that idea in his head, man. You know, and I understand. I don't want to get too much on me because it's the top 5, but I understand, because before I came into this knowledge, I had no desire to slow up, to stop. There was nothing in my mind that could get me to stop this. Pushing a line, gangbang. There was nothing. I had been shot. All kind of stuff happened to me, right? And there was nothing in my mind that was telling me that maybe I shouldn't do this. I moved from where I lived to a whole nother place 1,000 miles away. I could have easily told everybody I didn't gangbang and lived an entirely different life. But I wanted to let niggas know, and I wanted to push the line. Then I started putting niggas on there. I'm going to bring my set here. You see what I'm saying? Did all these various things, and I didn't want to stop. It literally was learning the knowledge of God, and I fought it for a long time, up until I didn't have a choice anymore. The Most High God said, look, you either going to be my priest or you going to be in the streets. So I had to make the choice, and I chose to be his priest, and he's blessed me immensely ever since through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shem Yahushai. But that's a rare thing to a brother as young as me, because again, I started learning at 17, but I didn't fully, I started teaching, but I'll be honest with you, I was still playing in the streets while I was teaching. There's nights that I put in work, and the next day I was on the streets teaching, putting work on my own people, and was on the streets teaching. I was a hypocrite during that time period. It was a small window of time, but it still existed, and it literally took for the Most High to really shake me up, as far as put me through some hell, and ultimately even put me in a cell. Which I got out in February 2013. But again, I started teaching in January 2011. So it was like a 2-year off and on thing where I was in and out the streets while still teaching. And up until the point where I got in the cell, and I said, okay, well, the Most High basically put it on me, like, either this is going to be your life, being in and out the county and even possibly going to the pen, because this is what comes with being in the streets, or you could just, do what you're supposed to do and preach this word and build this kingdom. And that's what I've been doing since my release, leaving the streets alone in totality. And man, I've been blessed immensely. But it literally took that for me to come into this realization. So it's sad that it takes those extreme things to do it. And I wish that spirit that WAC and Chip were in, of the UGs, would just sweep over all of us, man. And we could learn to forgive one another, and move forward into positivity. And that positivity is the truth that's in this Bible, that we are, as blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians, the nation of Israel, that who the world calls Christ a black man, Yahushua, his real name in the Hebrew, is coming to save us, man. Those are the things that need to sweep over our people, because that's the only thing that's going to benefit us at this point, right? But moving on, without any further ado, I want to get my number one, man. And my number one is Big Miz. Man, Big Miz, who is a rolling 90 neighborhood Crip, originally a 9-0 Hoover, and the 9-0 Hoovers merged with the 9-0 Gangsters to become the 9-0 West Coasters, and then eventually the 9-0 NACs. Man, Big Miz, man, is, man, I really like that interview, man. And I really like that interview because there was a lot of you could tell how genuine the brother is. You could tell how genuine he is, the level of maturity that he's came to, and just the spirit. He got a spirit, man. He got that light up the room spirit, man. Real cool brother from what I perceived of the brother through the video. And he gave a lot of important information on Hoover history, man, as well as the history of how the 9-0s came to be. All of that history is very important. But the thing is, anybody who noticed, of course, I have a Hoover bias for obvious reasons. If you ain't put it together by now, I ain't gonna spell it out for you. But from the Big Miz to the Big Wack and Big Chip, the UG interview, the Nugget interview, and even the Barefoot Pookie interview, there's a lot of Hoover information that's spilled there. Because Kev Mack has now, to this point, been able to interview Hoover, which is Tony Stacey, but that interview was not too much entrenched in Hoover history, which he damn well know we wanted. But it's all right. We know they told us it's coming soon. We know the brother got to put his books out. It's a money thing for him, the brother Tony Stacey, and that's all right. Everybody else been the guy paid off the Crip history. Why can't he? But they gave a lot of information that's key and that everybody wants to know about, because that's the only big one of the larger gangs that hasn't really fully expressed that history like that. A-Track gangsters have done it to a degree. The East Coasters, the neighborhood 60s, now the 90s. But the Inglewood families is on it. He had 2 different brothers from IF. But, and these are the larger gangs. The original Pyru, you see what I'm saying? These are the larger gangs. The Hoover was the only gang that was excluded from that of the larger gangs that hadn't told the story. So to hear, because Big Miz, of course, was a Hoover at one point in time before, the split came with the 9-0s. But this information, man, it was important, it was informative, and it's what we needed. Excuse me, it's getting a little hot. I gotta take this hoodie off, but it was informative, and it was what we needed, and because there was a lack thereof. So he was able to give a lot of good information, and like I said, he kept it 100, man, and I really loved that Big Miz interview a lot. I'm gonna give some honorable mentions though as well. I got some honorable mentions, and the honorable mentions are Cutes. Cute from Magnificent Seven, Crip, where I said I don't know how they didn't let the Magnificent Seven. That's one of the hardest names. They should have just let that Magnificent Seven ring out. Cutes, which I could tell his ass was in San Diego in that interview. I know that park that they was at, man. Been over there many times. But I was just like, damn, I wonder why I never ran into him. It seemed like the brother lived out there. I wonder why I never ran into him. But yeah, big shout out Cutes. The Kitchens was another honorable mention. Love the Kitchens interview. Bird, man, Bird with that history. Bird smart, man. That brother, that an elder brother in the community, man. And Bird was able to give a lot of good information, just in general, man, on the history of Los Angeles. He was able to go into the history of a lot of Hispanic gangs and deal with his relationship, black and brown relations, prior to all the politics, a lot of the politics that exist today, which are kind of diminishing today. But, they exist for a time. And he was able to talk about how good blacks and browns were getting along, and how many blacks was from Hispanic neighborhoods, and, things like that. So Bird had a lot of good information. I like that. But last but certainly not least, for the honorable mentions, is the Santanas, man. Thing I liked about the Santanas, I like the persona of gangster. Of Melly Mel, man. They have great personas, man. And what was crazy is, I watched the New York Santana interview, and Melly Mel mentioned the House of Consciousness, which I'm a part of that umbrella. We were just at those awards, etc. Back in July. He said 103rd in Lexington. It was 125th Street, brother. But and he asked the brothers from Santana Block in New York how they feel about those conscious brothers, and they made a very profound point about they think a lot of them are hypocrites because they get caught up in scandals that are worse than things that people on the street are doing, and that's true. Robbing people for large amounts of money, etc., scamming folks. It's a lot of that goes on, and that's unfortunate. But brothers see the hypocrisy in that, man. That's why we as Hebrew Israelites got to present ourselves properly, because even if they see hypocrisy in these dudes, they shouldn't be able to see hypocrisy in us and say, what, these brothers are keeping it real. They don't think they're holier than thou, because that's another thing that brothers resent, and that's how we can't act like we're holier than thou. We got to, like Paul said, become all things to all men. If you is a brother who was gangbanging in the street, I was the same way. So I can show you the path that you need to take in order to clean your way up. But I'm not going to act like I'm better than you because I was in the exact same place you were. That's the way that you reach brothers, not acting like they're so wrong and you're better than them, because these brothers know they living wrong. They know it. But they don't want a person faking like they're living right and they not, to tell them anything, because they can see through that, because that's what we're taught to do on the streets anyway, to see through niggas. You see what I'm saying? So that was profound, man. I really like the Santana's interview. Like I said, Santana's, Bird, Kitchens, Cutes, those are all honorable mentions. But again, my top 5. Number 1, Big Miz. Number 2, the UGs, Big Wack and Big Chip. Number 3, Nuggets' first interview from 12 Raymond. Number 4, King Baba Louie, his first one. And number 5, the 2018 interview of Barefoot Pookie. Those are my top 5 Kev Mac videos, man. You know, and I didn't realize that this was going to take that long, man. And I said, if it takes over a certain amount of time, I'm going to make this its own individual, unique episode of the podcast. And it surely did. So I'm going to end on this note. Big up to Kev Mac, though, again. I definitely want to say big up to Kev Mac. Big up to Fitzgerald for making fire music for this brother. Big up to the brother Crazo, man. Crazo for being just a real grown-ass black man. That's one of when I look at Crazo and I hear the brother speak, that's just a real grown-ass black man, you know, who keeps it 1,000, man. And I definitely appreciate that brother and his contributions to the Kev Mac platform and their live streams that they do on IG, all that, man. We got a lot of love for the brother Crazo. And the reason why I didn't mention Crazo in my top is because, of course, he's not an original. But you know, he is an original little homie and a real man. Most importantly, man, he gives a lot of insight on just being a real grown ass black man that we need. You know what I mean? That needs to be heard by the masses of our people, man, for sure. So I definitely would suggest watching all of Crazo's videos. I believe that it's a series called A Little Homie's Perspective. Definitely check them joints out. You know, and I've came on there and asked him about certain individuals that are the big brothers and big homies to my best friend, whom he knows and, you know, kind of ran with, you know, the ones from 12 on and things of that nature. So, you know, 6 degrees of separation in the streets and the world, period. You know, but definitely I'm going to end on that note. And of course, as always, we give all praises, all honor, and all glory unto the Most High God, Yahweh. We do so in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, a black man. It's your brother, Guerrilla Hebrew, signing out. Shalom.